New York City.
New York City. Table of contents.
A very important part of New York City, especially for visitors, is Broadway and the Broadway musicals.
Movie next. Give my regards to Broadway, James Cagney. Yahoo2.b web link. It is indeed New York City, the Big Apple, and Broadway that is the focal point of the musical and dramatic theater in America. The rise of the Big Apple, and the history of the Broadway musical.
Broadway is both a place and a metonym for a form of theater. As a place, it is a street on the island of Manhattan in New York City. As a word, it represents a theatrical art form known as the American musical theater.
As such, it had its beginnings on Broadway, but is now found in tens of thousands of community theaters and high school and college productions all over this country. As for example, a production of Fiddler on the Roof that I recently attended in Clackamas, Oregon, very far from Broadway in New York. Broadway shows also appear in various forms in film and television. This is Broadway in Times Square. So, indeed, it is New York City, the Big Apple, and Broadway that became the focal point of the musical and dramatic theater in America.
Now, we will look at early Broadway theaters.
Perhaps the earliest Broadway theater was the John Street Theater. This is a program from 1785. The John Street Theater opened in 1760, on John Street, just east of Broadway, in Lower Manhattan.
The beautiful Park Theater opened in 1810 on Park Row, at City Hall Park, on Broadway, north from the Battery, and towards the villages of Greenwich and Harlem.
A second theater, the Bowery, was built in 1821, on the Bowery.
In the period 1865 to 1908, there is the Madison Square Theater, at West 24th Street, between 6th Avenue and Broadway.
In 1882, we have the Casino Theater, at Broadway and 39th Street.
The migration of downtown theaters toward the north was already underway in the mid to late 1800s, and in 1893, there was the MP Theater, up at Broadway and 40th Street.
Here is a Currier and Ives painting showing the traffic on Broadway in the mid-1800s.
By the turn of the 20th century, theaters had reached up Broadway to 42nd Street and 7th Avenue, with Oscar Hammerstein's Victoria Theater in 1899.
Followed by the Republic Theater in 1900, and the Lyric and the New Amsterdam Theaters in 1903. And the Lou Fields Theater in 1904.
In 1900, Broadway theaters extended from the Star Theater on 13th Street to the New York Theater on 45th Street. Patrons were paying $1.50 to $2 each for the best seats to see their favorite stars.
The massive Hippodrome stretched the empty block on 6th Avenue between 43rd and 44th and could seat up to 5,000. Its Foo Premiere show in 1905 featured 280 chorus girls, 480 soldiers, an elephant parade, dancing horses, and a cavalry charge through a lake. The stage and its mechanics and tanks were overwhelming to theater goers. Though the spectacle shows were popular, the theater was soon in financial trouble. The Hippodrome was very soon to become an a Schubert theater. Hippodrome stage spectacles were noticed nationwide. Here is a postcard view of the Court of the Golden Fountain, seen from a society circus in 1905. The Schubert brothers built and operated many Broadway theaters.
Here are the three Schubert brothers.
This is the New Amsterdam Theater in 1913, with the operetta, The Merry Widow, being performed.
This is a vintage postcard of the Winter Garden Theater on Broadway, between 50th and 51st Streets, in Midtown Manhattan.
Timeline of events in the history of New York City in the 1900s. This is a brief timeline of events in the history of New York City in the 1900s. 1900. The International Ladies Garment Workers Union was founded. The population of New York City reached 3.4 million. 1902. The Flatiron Building was constructed. 1903. Williamsburg Bridge, New Amsterdam Theater, and Lyric Theater open. 1904. The New York City subway begins operating. 1908. The Singer Building was constructed. 1909. The Metropolitan Life Insurance Company Tower was built. 1910. The Pennsylvania Station was built. And Gimbals opens.
1911. 146 employees, mostly women, are killed in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, some by being forced to jump from the building by the fire. The Winter Garden Theater opened.
1913. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York was established. The Woolworth Building was built. The New York Highlanders changed their team's name to the New York Yankees. 1914. The parts of New York City annexed from Westchester County were renamed the Bronx.
1915. January 25th, the first transcontinental telephone call occurs, San Francisco to New York. 1916. The New York City Water Tunnel No. 1 began operating. 1918. The Great Influenza Pandemic rages across the country and worldwide. 1919. New York City recorded 30,000 deaths from the Spanish flu.
1920. The Apollo Theater on 42nd Street opened. The population of New York City reached 5.6 million. 1921. The Port of New York Authority was established. The first use of Big Apple as a nickname for the city appeared in a New York Morning Telegraph article by John J. Fitzgerald. 1923. The New York Yankees won their first World Series championship.
1924. Saks Fifth Avenue Shop and Simon & Schuster publisher in business. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade began. And in 1925, the population of New York City reached 7.8 million, making New York City the largest in the world. This would be relinquished in 1965 to Tokyo.
1926. The National Broadcasting Company, NBC, was launched. 1927. The Coney Island Cyclone roller coaster begins operating. The Holland Tunnel for automobiles under the Hudson River opened. The New York Giants won their first NFL championship after finishing the season with the best record. And in 1928, the New York Yankees won their third World Series championship. 1929. The Wall Street crash in October of 1929. Museum of Modern Art opened. The Stork Club and 21 Club began in business. CBS radio broadcasting of Cotton Club performances begins. The Great Depression. 1930. The Chrysler Building was constructed. 1931. The Empire State Building was built. And the Waldorf Astoria Hotel is in business. 1932. Radio City Music Hall opened. And the New York Yankees won their fourth World Series championship. And in 1933, the RCA Building was constructed. 1934, Fiorello LaGuardia became mayor. And the New York Giants won their second NFL championship. 1935, the New York passenger ship terminal was built. 1936, the Triborough Bridge opened. The New York City Water Tunnel No. 2 began operating. And the New York Yankees won their sixth World Series championship. 1937. The Lincoln Tunnel under the Hudson River opened. Carnegie Deli and Stage Deli are in business. The New York Yankees won their seventh World Series championship. 1938. The New York Yankees became the first team in Major League Baseball history to win their third straight World Series championship. 1939. The 1939 New York World's Fair opens. The New York Yankees won their fourth consecutive World Series title. Rockefeller Center was built. And the New York Municipal Airport, in 1953 to be renamed LaGuardia Airport, opens.
1940. The population of New York City reached 7.5 million. 1941. The first two television stations in the city signed on the air for the first time. The first was WNBT Channel 1, now WNBC Channel 4, and the second was WCBW, now WCBS-TV, Channel 2. The New York Yankees won their ninth World Series championship. 1942. The burning and capsizing of the French Transatlantic Ocean liner, SS Normandy, in Pier 88. 1944. WIBD Channel 4, now WNYW Channel 5, became the third television station in the city. 1945. A B-25 Mitchell bomber accidentally crashed into the 79th floor of the Empire State Building, killing 13 people.
1945. Victory of a Japan Day celebrated in Times Square with a famous kiss photograph taken by Alfred Eisenstadt. 1946. New York City Victory Parade of 1946. 1947. Jackie Robinson of the Brooklyn Dodgers crosses the baseball goal line. Of 6 million New Yorkers we vaccinated in order to end the smallpox outbreak. 1948. WPIX Channel 11 became the fifth television station in the city. 1948. Channel 7 signed on as WJZ-TV, now WABC-TV. The New York International Airport, renamed John F. Kennedy International Airport after 1963, is dedicated. 1949. New York Yankees won their 12th World Series title. Channel 9 became the last VHF station in the city to sign on the IE as WOH-TV, now WWOH-TV. 1950. The Brooklyn Battery Tunnel opened. Port Authority Bus Terminal opened. And in 1951, the New York Yankees won their third consecutive World Series title.
1952. The United Nations headquarters and Pier 57 were built. 1957. New York is left with only one MLB team with the departure of the Giants and the Dodgers. 1958. Guggenheim Museum opened. And construction of the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts began.
1960. The population of New York City reached 7.8 million. 1961. New York Yankees won their 19th World Series title. The New York Yankees won their 20th World Series title. The New York Mets baseball team was founded. 1963. The critically acclaimed Beaux-Arts-style Pennsylvania station was demolished. 1964. The 1964 New York World's Fair opens. The Verrazano Narrows Bridge between Brooklyn and Staten Island opened. The bridge at the time was the longest in the world. Shea Stadium opened. Pennsylvania Station was rebuilt.
1965. New York City was affected as part of the Northeast Blackout of 1965. 1967. South Street Seaport Museum was founded. 1968. Madison Square Garden opened. 1969. The Sesame Street children's television program began broadcasting. And the New York Mets won their first World Series title. 1970. First New York City Marathon run. Now largest in the world. The New York Knicks won their first NBA championship. 1972. Queens Museum of Art founded. 1973. World Trade Center towers built. 1975. New York City fiscal crisis. Giants NFL team ceases playing in the city and plays its first game in the Meadowlands at the new Giants Stadium. And Battery Park City was created on land reclaimed from the Hudson River. 1977. The New York City Blackout of 1977. I Love New York advertising campaign began. The New York Yankees won their 21st World Series championship. And in 1978, the Yankees won their 22nd championship.
1982. The Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum opened. 1983. The Jets played the last NFL game in New York City at Shea Stadium. They subsequently moved to Giants Stadium in New Jersey. 1986. The New York Mets won their second World Series title in franchise history. And the Ford World Financial Center was built. 1987. The New York Giants won Super Bowl 21 at the Rose Bowl. 1988. The Phantom of the Opera opens on Broadway and earns the record for longest-running show. 1989. New York becomes a sanctuary city for illegal immigrants. 1990. The population of New York City reached 7.3 million. 1993. A bomb planted by terrorists explodes in the World Trade Center's underground garage, killing 6 people and injuring over 1,000. And the New York Yankees won the 23rd World Series championship, their first in 18 years.
1994. Rudy Giuliani became mayor. 1997. Museum of Jewish Heritage opens. 1998. New York Yankees won their 24th World Series championship. 1999. Deaths in New York City from AIDS exceed 75,000 since the onset of the disease. Times Square and the Theater District.
Does anybody remember Longacre Square? Longacre Square is where Broadway intersects 7th Avenue. Does this scene look familiar?
In 1904, Longacre Square, where Broadway intersects 7th Avenue, was renamed Times Square in honor of the New York Times building that was just erected there.
6 months later, the Times Square subway station opened, which made this location easily accessible to the theater-going public. This started the boom in new theaters in this area of Broadway and marked the beginning of the Broadway Theater District.
Times Square, formerly Longacre Square, looking south in 1911. It shows Times Square with theaters, shops, hotels, the Times Building, people, trolleys, and horse-drawn wagons in the street.
Here is Times Square in 1919. Here is Times Square in 1931.
This is Times Square in the present day.
This is Times Square at dusk.
Times Square is where Broadway crosses 7th Avenue between 42nd Street and 44th Street. It's not really a square, but rather two acute triangular areas formed by the intersection of Broadway and 7th Avenue.
The Broadway Theater District today extends from West 41st Street, where the Nederlander Theater is located, up to West 53rd Street and the Broadway Theater.
Only 4 theaters are actually on Broadway itself. These being the Marquee at 46th Street, the Palace at 47th Street, the Winter Garden at 50th Street, and the Broadway at 53rd.
All the other Broadway theaters are located close by on side streets, east or west of this 12-block stretch of Broadway. How many Broadway theaters are actually on Broadway? And is a theater not on Broadway called an off-Broadway theater?
Only 4 Broadway theaters out of a total of 41 are actually on Broadway, and most others are on side streets, within a few blocks of Broadway. The Broadway theaters have 500 or more seats, with ticket prices generally upwards of $75. Theaters with 99 seats or fewer generally do not have to pay the union scale and are considered off-Broadway, with tickets in the $20 range. Theaters with 99 seats or fewer generally do not have to pay the union scale and are considered off-Broadway, with tickets in the $20 range. This is Broadway in 1908.
Thus, the Broadway theaters made a gradual migration from Lower Broadway at the tip of Manhattan. They went first to the area around Herald Square, which is where Broadway, 6th Avenue, and 34th Street all intersect.
Near the Empire State Building and Macy's department store.
And finally, up to the area on Broadway, near Times Square and 42nd Street.
Here is Macy's on 34th Street at Herald Square.
This movement of the theater district at Broadway, first to Herald Square and then to Times Square and 42nd Street, is immortalized in the famous George M. Cohan song, Give My Regards to Broadway.
With the lyrics, Give my regards to Broadway. Remember me to Herald Square. Tell all the gang at 42nd Street that I will soon be there.
Here is Broadway at West 50th Street, also known as Gershwin Way.
This is the Winter Garden Theater, on Broadway, near West 50th Street.
This is Broadway at West 50th Street looking south towards Times Square.
This is the Schubert Theater, 225 West 44th Street near Broadway.
In 1866, the first musical comedy, The Crook, opened in New York City. It was later described as a combination of French romantic ballet and German melodrama. It attracted patrons of opera and serious drama, as well as those of burlesque shows.
The musical is set in the year 1600, in the Harz Mountains of Germany. It incorporates elements from Goethe's Faust, Weber's Der Freischütz and other well-known works. Evil wealthy Count Wolfenstein seeks to marry the lovely village girl, Amina. The count arranges for Amina's fiancé to fall into the hands of Herzog, an ancient master of magic.
The Crook was a musical extravaganza. And for the first time ever, audiences saw drama, were entertained by an orchestra, and saw 100 gypsies on the stage.
A new, totally American art form, the Broadway musical, had been created.
A ballet troupe was brought over from France to perform at the Academy of Music. However, the building had burned down before the ballet troupe had a chance to perform.
The promoters of the ballet had invested a lot of money in bringing the troupe over from France, and needed to find an alternate place for the troupe to perform.
The theater options at that time in Manhattan were very limited.
One of the options was Niblo's Garden.
Niblo's Garden on Broadway, near Prince Street in Lower Manhattan, seated 3,200 people, and had the best-equipped stage in the city.
But the theater was already committed to the production of The Crook, a second-rate play, with little chance of success.
The decision was made to incorporate the ballet troupe into the play, resulting in a musical extravaganza of more than 5 hours in length.
The addition to the play of music, songs, and most importantly, the somewhat scantily dressed dancing girls of the ballet troupe, made The Crook an instant success.
The Crook had a run of 16 months, and grossed over $1 million.
We will now have a short video about the play, The Crook. We will now have another short video about the play, The Crook. The success of The Crook in 1866 led to many other productions based on the same basic idea. Two different formats evolved.
One was the variety shows, such as burlesque vaudeville and revue, which had a series of unrelated acts or skits, not following any particular overall storyline.
The other format was the operetta and then later the book musical. The operettas were mostly of European origin and style. It is a musical drama that is generally comic or romantic in nature, and has songs and dance together with spoken dialogue.
New York City in the Two World Wars.
New York City was the closest major U.S. port to Europe and North Africa during both World Wars. It played a major role in shipping men and material to the battlefront. The port of Boston was perhaps slightly closer, but New York's superior port facilities and land transportation to the rest of the country gave it a substantial lead.
This is the parade of the 77th Division in 1919, as they returned home after the end of World War I. This shows the parade passing through the Victory Arch at Madison Square.
These are the passengers and tons of cargo embarked from U.S. ports during World War II, the period December 1941 to August 1945. We see that the New York port of embarkation was the largest in terms of men, number of passengers, and materiel, tons of cargo. In second place was San Francisco, supplying the Pacific theater of operation during the war.
On the East Coast, supplying the European and North African fronts, New York was by a very large measure the leader, followed distantly by Boston, Hampton Roads, Baltimore and Charleston. This is the RMS Queen Mary in New York Harbor during World War II.
The port of New York in the age of transatlantic liners. New York City was the principal East Coast port for the transatlantic liners from Europe. This is a circa 1960 postcard showing New York City's transatlantic steamship terminal in the Hudson River between 44th and 54th Streets.
New York City was the closest major port to Europe during the great age of the transatlantic liners. This was roughly from the 1920s to the 1960s. except for the World War I, 1914 to 1918, and World War II, 1939 to 1945, periods.
This terminal opened in 1935 and had piers that were 1,000 feet long to accommodate the large ocean liners.
The ships shown here are the American export lines SS Independence, 1951, the U.S. lines SS America, 1939, and SS United States, 1952. The Greek lines SS Olympia, 1953. USS Intrepid, 1943. The Cunard lines RMS Mauritania, 1938. And the RMS Queen Elizabeth, 1946, turning into its berth.
This is the SS Normandy leaving from New York in 1937. She averaged a speed of 31 knots.
World War II broke out in September 1939. In March 1940. The brand new 83,673-ton RMS Queen Elizabeth arrived in New York City. She had just made her secret maiden voyage across the North Atlantic in a daring escape from the threat of German bombers.
On August 31, 1939, the SS Normandy was laid up in New York after completing her 139th crossing due to the impending threat of war in Europe. These fears were justified the following day when Germany invaded Poland and the Second World War began. Arrival. The RMS Queen Mary was beside her on the south side of Cunard's Pi 90.
For a brief period, the only three liners to exceed 80,000 gross tons were moored beside each other. The RMS Queen Elizabeth on the north side of Pier 90. The RMS Queen Mary would soon sail to Sydney to convert into a troop transport.
In the post-war period after World War II, the transatlantic liners resumed their dominance of travel until they were overcome by jet aircraft in the 1960s. An important ship of that era was the SS United States, which broke the transatlantic speed records with a crossing time of just 3.5 days at an average speed of 34.5 knots.
After jet travel became dominant, New York City retained its preeminence as the principal port of the country. Now for international air travel in place of the great ocean liners of the past. The demographics of New York City.
These are the population numbers and percentages of the various races in New York City. With that, indeed, New York is a multi-ethnic and multiracial city. As many as 800 languages are spoken throughout New York City, making it the most diverse city in the world regarding linguistic multiplicity. New York City attractions.
This is New York City and the adjacent New England area.
This is New York City metropolitan area. These are the boroughs of New York City and major interstate highways. These are the 5 boroughs of New York City. This is New York City and Long Island. Long Island has the 2 New York City boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens and the counties of Nassau and Suffolk. This, again, is New York City and Long Island. The 3 airports on Long Island are LaGuardia, JFK International Airport, and the Long Island MacArthur Airport, ISP, formerly known as the Islip Airport.
These are the 5 boroughs of New York City, with some of the major attractions of each borough. There are many tourist attractions in New York City. New York City is accessible from many points in the U.S. and the world with 3 major airports for domestic flights with LaGuardia, LGA, in Queens and both Newark Liberty International Airport, EWR, in Newark. New Jersey and JFK International Airport in Queens for international flights.
Manhattan. This shows the major areas or districts of Manhattan.
This is a map of Manhattan neighborhoods. This is a street map of Manhattan. This is a map of tourist routes in Manhattan. On theworldmap.com web link.
This is a sightseeing map of Manhattan.
This is a tourist map of Manhattan. This is a sightseeing map of Manhattan. On theworldmap.com web link. This is a map and list of Manhattan tourist attractions. This is a map of Lower Manhattan. This is a map and list of sightseeing spots in Lower Manhattan.
This is a map and list of parks in Lower Manhattan. Recommended videos. New York City.
Recommended video, Here Grows New York.
Recommended video, History of New York City. Recommended video, The History of New York in 12 minutes.
Recommended video, What's Left of New Amsterdam and the Origins of the USA.
Recommended video, George Washington's Defeat in New York.
Recommended video, The Simple Genius of New York City's Water Supply System.
Recommended video, A Closer Look at New York City's Water Supply. Recommended video, The Port of New York and New Jersey. Recommended video, The Erie Canal.
Recommended video, New York City Draft Riots of 1863. Recommended video, Modern Marvels, Building the Brooklyn Bridge.
Recommended video, America's First Mega Project. The Amazing Story of the Brooklyn Bridge.
Recommended video, The City of Greater New York. The Story of Consolidation.
Recommended video, How did the boroughs of New York get their names?
Recommended video, Top 10 Best Places to Visit in Manhattan, New York. Manhattan Travel Guide. Recommended video, Top 10 Things to Do in Manhattan.
Recommended video, to 10 Things to Do in Brooklyn.
Recommended video, 9 Best Things to Do in Queens. Recommended video, Top Rated Attractions and Things to Do in the Bronx.
Recommended video, Top 7 Things to Do in Staten Island, New York City's Unexpected Gem. Recommended video, Top 10 Largest U.S. Cities by Population, 1790 to 2017. Recommended video, Biggest U.S. Cities, 1776 to 2035.
Recommended video, Top 15 Most Populated Cities in the World, 1700 to 2019.
Recommended video, YouTube navigation.
Recommended videos. Walking tours of New York City. For a street-level experience of New York City. View the video walking tours. It's the next best thing to being there.
Recommended videos, New York City Walking Tour playlist. Recommended video, New York City Walking Tour by New York Tour 1. Part 1, Midtown Manhattan.
Recommended video, New York City Walking Tour by New York Tour 1. Part 2, Downtown Manhattan. Recommended video, New York City Virtual Walking Tour. Midtown Manhattan New York City Walk. Hudson Yards and Midtown West. Recommended video, Driving Downtown. New York City.
Recommended video, New York City's Financial District Walking Tour. Recommended video, New York City 4K Walking Tour. Downtown Manhattan. One World Trade Center to South Street Seaport. Recommended video, New York City Walking Tour 4K. Fifth Avenue. Sunset Walk. Recommended video, New York City Walking Tour Part 1. Midtown Manhattan. Recommended video, New York City Walking Tour. Times Square. New York City. Table of Contents.
Thanks for watching. This is continued in Part 4.